Wake up, America! It's not for safety. We're getting transformed into a socialist country. Okay, some of us know that we have to fight. So guess what I did? I got two big bad lawyers.
That's a good thing, Candace, because you're going to have the best lawyers in the world to take down Facebook. Hi, I'm Ian Corzine, your social media lawyer. For 12 years, I was a lawyer for media companies. Now I bring that experience to teach you how not to break social media laws. Today, we're looking about whether or not social media laws were broken in this Candace Owens fact-checking scandal. I'll do this by reacting to what Candace Owen alleges and then looking at the law that applies. During the video, I'm going to give you 3 core points that I think will help you in the future not break social media laws. Let's start off by looking at what Candace said Facebook did wrong. I'm going to take you to my computer. Now I'm at my computer. Let's start off by looking at what Candace says Facebook did wrong.
And these people that are fact checkers, I decided months ago when I had an incident on Facebook happen where quite literally my opinion was fact checked. And then quite literally, a doctor gave his opinion about COVID-19, which I shared, and Facebook issued a strike on my account. So Facebook demonetized my page, and I decided that I was not going to give up and sit down.
Even though Candace appears to blame Facebook for censoring her, she's careful not to say that she's suing Facebook. She's suing the Facebook fact checkers.
We are going after the fact checkers.
It's kind of a mixed message that Candace is giving us. On one hand, she's blaming Facebook for censoring her, and on the other hand, she's blaming the Facebook fact checkers. One of them in particular is called leadstories.com.
Launched the first lawsuit against leadstories.com. Leadstories.com, one of the main fact checkers for Facebook.com.
Next, Candace says she's going to sue USA Today, apparently for improper fact checking.
Second up, USA Today. They have fact-checked my opinion one too many times, demonetized my page, because apparently there's a right way to have an opinion and there's a wrong way to have an opinion, which is anybody that wants to talk about their experiences and say that America is turning into a communist country.
This brings us to our core point number 1 that you can learn from. If you ever have to sue someone, a person, a corporation, you can only sue someone that has actually caused you harm. You can't sue other parties and bring them into the lawsuit if they haven't damaged you in some way. So the rule from this is, if you ever have to commence a lawsuit, you can only make as defendants those individuals or companies that have caused you harm.
Seems a little shady. I don't know. We're going to find out because I'm going to put these suckers through discovery.
Now, this is kind of an interesting statement. Put these suckers through discovery. These words are lawyer type words. Lawyers talk about putting a litigant through discovery. And discovery is a process where two opposing sides or multiple parties exchange information that's relevant about the lawsuit. Now, typically, the purpose of a lawsuit is to get a remedy, to get some money, to get something changed in society. And putting someone through discovery is really not a proper use of litigation. Now, the timing of Candace's Twitter post kind of conveys that she is going to sue. She's going to sue these fact checkers. It's unclear whether or not she's going to sue Facebook, but in actuality, the lawsuit has already been filed. It was filed in a Delaware state court on October 19th, 2020. Let's take you into that complaint. All right, now we're going to dive into Candace Owens' lawsuit against Lead Stories LLC and Gannett Satellite Information Network, DBA USA Today, the two fact checkers that she says has caused her harm. Now, we notice at first, the first part is the lawsuit is in the Superior Court for the state of Delaware. The probable reason for this is that the state of Delaware, the judges there are really well known for their super knowledgeable understanding of the most current law that applies to civil lawsuits. So oftentimes people file lawsuits in the state of Delaware because they really, really want the cutting edge of the law in the United States. All right, now we're going to go to the beginning of the complaint. It says, now comes plaintiff Candace Owens and Candace Owens LLC. Why is Candace Owens LLC a plaintiff in this action, meaning the person who's suing in this action? Because Candace's social media is all owned by Candace Owens LLC, her Facebook, her Instagram, her YouTube. That's all owned by this LLC that she created. Why did she do this? Because she wanted to protect her personal assets. She is very smart. She wants to make sure that if ever she gets sued for defamation or some other cause of action, that she has some protection. She has this corporate entity out front to protect in case she's found liable for some large amount of damages in a lawsuit. If that's the case, she will only be liable to the extent of her LLC's assets. Her home, her cars, her other personal possessions will not be subject to being liquidated and paid in a lawsuit against her and her corporation, or her LLC in this case. All right, now we'll move on to the beginning of the complaint. In the introduction section, we see this action arises from defendants' malicious publication of false fact-check articles. Defendants refers to the fact checkers. She's saying that they're fact-checking their notification to Facebook that some of her posts were in error was malicious, and she's entitled to recover for that. Now, this is an interesting lawsuit. We don't see many of these where someone is saying fact-checking caused financial harm. We're going to go into it in more detail a little bit later on, but this is a new lawsuit that we're not seeing a lot of. In the party section of a complaint, the plaintiff often sets forth the basic facts of the lawsuit. In this particular case, Candace is saying she is a highly regarded, free-thinking, and popular African-American conservative commentator who offers her opinion on a variety of political issues. She just recently published a book called Blackout, so maybe she's trying to sell to the judges her new book. Candace is also very humble. In paragraph 12, she says Candace is a prominent social media star. At paragraph 16, I'm going to highlight it right here. We have the statement, but her popularity does not come without opposition. Facebook employees motivated by hostility towards Candace's conservative political viewpoint and open support of President Trump have maliciously and falsely labeled her as a hate agent and actively attempt to limit her use of Facebook's platform. Notice that there's a little footnote number 5. We often do this in complaints as lawyers so that we can highlight evidence or further support our allegations. Now, interestingly, I went down to this footnote and I clicked on this URL, and this article is no longer there. So her evidence of being labeled as a hate agent isn't on the internet right now. All right, now we get into the factual background behind her lawsuit. It says here at paragraph 53, on March 29th, 2020, Candace published a post via her Facebook page that outlined facts and her opinions surrounding the method U.S. government officials were using to count the COVID-19 pandemic death toll. It says here, Candace's first Facebook post is true or substantially true. That is an element of the cause of action that she's going to sue on, which one of them is defamation. So she's making sure that the judge knows that she's satisfying all the elements of the applicable causes of action with allegations. Now we're moving on to the second issue, which Candace brings up in her lawsuit, and that is the second Facebook post. On April 28th, 2020, Candace published a post via her Facebook page that questioned the relationship between and the counting of flu deaths and COVID-19 deaths in early 2020. This was the actual post. According to CDC reports, 2020 is working out to be the lowest flu death season of the decade. 20,000 flu deaths took place before COVID-19 in January, and then only 4,000 deaths thereafter. To give you context, 80,000 Americans died of the flu in 2019. And then she says right here at paragraph 62, the second Facebook post communicates Candace's opinion and was not interpreted by reasonable readers to convey actual statements of fact. Now, basically what she's saying at this point is that when USA Today and the fact checkers checked this particular Facebook post, it wasn't a statement of fact that Candace was making. And so any attempt to fact check it was just erroneous, because you can't fact check an opinion. You can only fact check an actual statement of fact. Now, here is where Candace is saying she was hurt by these fact checking statements. She says the defendant's articles individually and collectively cause Facebook to restrict the viewability of plaintiff's first and second Facebook posts through the use of false information warning labels. Moreover, the defendant's articles individually and collectively cause Facebook to demonetize plaintiffs by suspending their ability to derive revenue from Facebook. Now, this is a key allegation of the complaint, and this is something that Candace is actually going to have to prove later on in time. She has to prove the defendants knew and were substantially certain that its articles would be used by Facebook as a justification to suspend plaintiff's ability to derive revenue from Facebook. So she's going to have to prove that these fact checkers were substantially certain, or they knew, that their articles would cause Candace to not be able to make money through Facebook. And this is another key allegation at paragraph 93. The defendants acted with actual and common law malice to curtail and sever Candace's opportunities to expand her business, her market for views, opinions, and publications, and her goodwill. Again, she's going to have to prove in a court of law that the fact checkers acted with malicious intent. They were really trying to destroy her business. And here's where we get into the nitty gritty of what Candace Owens allegedly makes through Facebook income. It says here at paragraph 99, Candace Owens LLC derives significant revenue from posts it makes on various social media websites, including Facebook. For example, between June 1st, 2020 and June 21st, 2020 alone, Candace Owens LLC generated approximately $780,000 in revenue from advertising on Facebook for an average approximately of $35,500 per day. And then it says here at paragraph 10, it's amazing. I had no idea she was making this kind of money. On a monthly basis, Candace Owens LLC loses $1,065,000 in Facebook revenues. This, along with other damages caused by Facebook's ban, result in monthly damages of over $1 million. Now we move on to the end of the complaint, and that is the cause of action section. The first cause of action is the first claim, the legal claim that Candace is making against these fact checkers, and that's intentional interference with contractual relations. It's a commonly asserted cause of action. One of the key components of this cause of action is defendants had actual knowledge of the contract between Candace Owens and Facebook. That's going to be a difficult thing to prove. They had actual knowledge. Unless there's some witness that knows about the contract between Candace and Facebook and had told the fact checkers about this, it's going to be hard to prove. Another thing that's going to be hard to prove is paragraph 127, defendant lead stories committed an intentional act by publishing defamatory statements that it knew would be utilized by Facebook to justify banning of Candace Owens LLC from deriving advertising revenue. So what they're saying here is that, Candace is going to have to prove that lead stories intentionally, they put these fact-checking statements, they do these fact-checking articles intentionally to stop Candace Owens from making money with Facebook and the other social media platforms. Now, in count number 2, Candace appears to imply that the fact checkers were trying to stop her from making any money, including money from her book. It doesn't really ring true given the fact that the particular post she has a problem with took place back in March and April of 2020, and that was way before her book came out, but she does allege it in this second count. Now, what we can learn from review of these initial counts is core point number 2, and that is these causes of action, these claims are intentional claims. Candace Owens has got to prove that these fact checkers had the intent to hurt her business in order to recover the millions that she alleges in her lawsuit. So what we can take from that is if you ever have to allege intentional torts in a civil action, in a lawsuit against someone, you got to prove intent. And that's difficult sometimes to do because even if the other side really did have the intent to hurt your business, they don't often voice it. They don't often put it in emails or it's recorded in a video. So you've got to use circumstantial evidence to prove intent to hurt the plaintiff's business, in this case, Candace Owens' business. Now we'll move on to review Candace's final counts for defamation. What is defamation? Defamation is where a plaintiff has to prove that defendant's conduct, a false statement, actually caused damages. And so what's interesting about this particular cause of action is that Candace is a public figure. She admits it in her complaint. She actually said she's a social media star. So you actually have to prove that they really maliciously, they had a bad intent. They really, really wanted to hurt you and cause you damage. And that's what she alleges right here on paragraph 154. Lead Stories published its false accusations about plaintiffs with actual malice as previously alleged in the complaint. And what's interesting is here's that damage number. Paragraph 156, Candace has suffered significant reputational harm as a result of Lead Story's April 1st article. She demands $50 million in damages for reputational harm. So that is what Candace is saying these fact checkers owe her in damages. This brings us to core point number 3, and that is if you ever have to sue someone for defamation and you yourself are a public figure, and it's a question of fact, who is a public figure? Is a public figure someone who's on the cover of Time magazine? Is a public figure someone who has 5 million subscriptions? What if you only have 100 subscriptions on YouTube? Are you a public figure? If you're determined by the court or the jury, depending upon the issue, that you are a public figure, then you have a higher standard to be able to actually successfully prosecute a defamation action, which makes it harder to sue. And oftentimes, a lot of people who are technically defamed don't bring a lawsuit because it's so hard to prove the cause of action because they themselves are a public figure. So is Facebook going to lose the Candace Owens fact-checking lawsuit? No, because it is not a party, which brings us to a review of our core points. Core point number 1, if you're going to bring a lawsuit, you can only sue the parties that actually did you harm. Core point number 2, if you're bringing a lawsuit for defamation or intentional interference with the contractual relations, you as the plaintiff have to prove that the defendants, in this case the fact checkers, intentionally wanted to cause you harm. Core point number 3, if you're going to bring a lawsuit for defamation and you're determined to be a public figure, then you have a much higher evidentiary burden. You've got to prove actual malice. The defendants actually and maliciously intended harm. Candace is going to have a hard time proving actual malice in this lawsuit. So Facebook is not going to lose this lawsuit, but Candace Owens might. She has such a high evidentiary burden to prove intent on behalf of the fact checkers and actual malice. So I'm predicting, and my opinion is, she will not win the lawsuit. But you know what? A lot of times, kind of as a side note, people bring lawsuits not necessarily to win. They bring a lawsuit to assert leverage or to get publicity. So this may be Candace Owens' attempt to get some leverage for a settlement negotiation or to get some publicity on the matter. Speaking of controversies, have you heard about the one with Sarah Cooper? She made some lip sync videos with Donald Trump's speeches and she got some notoriety. She's famous, she's got some good money. She even has a show on Netflix right now. But the main point is she took President Donald Trump's words without his permission and was able to capitalize on that. Is this fair? If you want to learn more about this controversy, watch right here. And as always, as you watch, I'm going to be at iancorzine.com to answer any of your social media law questions.